on this computer. All right, we're live.
Are we gonna have like intro music? Do I need to?
No, well, we weren't going to, but now I'm going to have this as like my, the theme song every time. So the first, like, and it's going to be with a video of you doing do, just because you did that. So I'll talk about the law of reflexivity of maybe in a next video, but because that's actually something George Soros coined. It's called the law of reflexivity. How something you fear brings it into existence. And so like if you ever feared like being like publicly ridiculed or anything, you just brought it into existence. Anyway, so like we were saying before we started the video recording, tonight we're going to be talking about the Book of Judges from a libertarian anarchist point of view, because and we're going to be using it to illustrate what are fundamental laws of human nature called the laws of archotropism. The word archotropism comes from two Greek root words, archo meaning ruler, and tropism meaning to turn. So archotropism means the process of turning a state, or turning a nation towards statism. How do you make a nation more status? How does a state come into existence? And for the purposes of this video, we're going to be using the Rothbardian definition of a state, which is the monopoly on aggression, coercion, and violence.
Basically, a country in the world that started out defining itself as trying to free itself from tyranny, eventually become socialist.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, that's actually the law of reflexivity right there. I just mentioned earlier that George Soros has this idea that it's like, for him, it's like he uses it as a kind of a law of behavioral economics for how do you make good trades on the stock market. But basically his the way he applies it and he explains it is, hey, the thing you fear comes into existence, and there's a lot of money, power, wealth in being the supplier of the thing feared. Basically, because basically, let's say you fear something, and you're willing to you should be willing to pay to make it go away. So like you fear it, it doesn't exist, but because you fear it, someone can get you to pay them to make, if they like threaten you, they can, like, you fear being threatened and having your life taken, and so therefore I can come up to you with a gun and say, give me your money. And and that the thing feared means you will give me money to make me go away.
But it's protection that the mafia used to charge.
Basically, yeah. And and the state kind of does the same thing where hey, we will keep the chaos at bay and we will provide you a like safe social order. And but what they do, but kind of behind your back, we saw this year in 2020, which is they will let the mob run rampant because it scares the fuck out of people. And excuse my swearing, I know we're going to be talking about the Bible tonight, but I'm sorry, I'm not a very good Christian. I'm a Catholic.
There's a lot of really bad language in the Bible if you really stop and think about it. So
I know for sure. I mean, Jesus was like, he was brutal to the Pharisees. Anyway, den of vipers, and anyway, so it's like, it was no wonder they wanted to kill him. It's like, people always read Jesus in this, oh, I'm authoritative. He who is without sin may cast the first stone. And it's like, people don't want to kill that guy. The people he want to kill, if you're reading Jesus properly, you usually read him with a very sassy, sarcastic tone of voice. And he's just like biting them every time and just pissing them off. You should be really reading like that one verse as like, whichever one I use without sin can cast the first stone. Ha ha, you didn't get me. Nice try.
Well, theory about that story, right, is that whenever he was leaning over to write in the dirt, the theory is writing down their mistresses.
Pretty much, yeah.
Okay, so
yeah,
because
that's why they kept dropping the stones and leaving. Yeah, that's like he's either writing down their sins or writing down their mistresses. It's like because he's God and he knows it, and he's also kind of like saying "fuck you." But he did the same thing in the there's like the one time he's ever talked about public policy. It was when he said, render unto Caesar what belongs to Caesar, render unto God what belongs to God. And that was in response to the Sadducees, I believe it's the Sadducees, asking him like, hey, should we pay taxes to Rome? Because it would have been extremely politically incorrect. Yeah, he was just lost, a tons of followers if he had said yes or no. If he had said yes, then his Jewish base would have just like left him like, no, screw you, we're not paying taxes to some land thief Caesar. And if he said no, then the Romans are right there ready to kill him.
People that wanted their roads.
Yeah, exactly. They want their roads and bridges. Anyway, but the way he said, render to Caesar what belongs to Caesar, render to God what belongs to God. It's funny because both the Romans and the Jews walked away hearing completely different things. and you see this like later when they're trying to put him to death. And they're saying to Pilate's like, I haven't found anything wrong with this guy. And he's like, well, the Sadducees, the priests, were like, well, about that, he actually said, don't pay taxes to Caesar. And like, what are you talking about? Well, because when what the Jews heard was render unto God what belongs to God. All right, Caesar owns nothing, and God owns everything, so don't pay Caesar. And the Romans heard exactly the opposite of their God's fake and Caesar owns everything, pay taxes to Caesar. They both walked away hearing the exact opposite thing. And Pilate was kind of they had to kind of explain, about that, Pilate, we don't really believe in paying taxes to you. And they kind of had to explain that, when they were trying to get Pilate to put him to death. Because after all the false charges, they lied about him for 13 hours or something like that, and just nothing worked. Finally, they got him to just like say, okay, yeah, I'm the Son of God. And even that, Pilate's like, what the fuck do I care? And like, all right, okay, he said don't pay taxes. All right, I get it. It's like, all right, off, let's hang him. Anyway, let's get into the content. So the content for tonight, because we're going to be talking about Old Testament, Jesus is New Testament. We're going to be talking about the Old Testament tonight. That where she's the hey, if God wanted to, the subject of Judges is, if God wanted to make a nation to call his own, how would he govern it? And basically what you see is, shock twist, the God of free will is like a radical anarchist who believes in like voluntary trade and like private property. And he doesn't believe in statism. Like, no kidding. It's like he's like the radical extremist when it comes to free will and letting people choose what they want. So it really is no surprise that he came up with a system of government for a nation that doesn't involve government, or at least not as we think of it. There's no using the Rothbardian definition of what a state is. It is a monopoly on aggression, violence, and coercion. And and when you look at the law of Moses, there is no entity that has a monopoly on violence or coercion or aggression. That doesn't exist. So basically, it is a stateless society, that you see in the Book of Judges for about 400 years. Now by the way, it makes this point about 4 times. And when God does that, when he repeats something for a line 4 times, it's because he's bragging. This is like, hey, I pulled this off with it, but because there are a bunch of libertarians today, like, how in the world would we do an anarchy today? Like, how would we make ANCAPISTAN? And God's kind of bragging 3,500 years ago, like, hey, I pulled this off with a bunch of barbarians, and you idiots can't do it with like your modern 21st century technology. Good luck. It's like,
I've always thought that people talk about they want anarchy. I was like, anarchy terrifies me. I am not in favor of anarchy.
Yeah.
What I have always thought would be fantastic is an actual theocracy, that like individualized theocracy where you're governed by like the law of your conscience and of the soul and spirit would be fantastic. And if only that had happened several times in history,
Yeah. Does it? Does it scare you at all that it says exactly that every man did as he saw fit, and it says in the 4 times it says this line: in those days there was no king in Israel, and every man lived as was right in his own eyes. He basically every man lived as he saw fit, and that's another translation of that. And it says that 4 times, and when God says that, when God repeats a line like that 4 times, he's bragging. And so everyone kind of lived by their own conscience, and it worked pretty well. There were a few problems, and we're going to get into those. And this is something that, by the way, a state doesn't solve, because it just kind of makes it worse. But this is a problem that every society is always going to have, and this is like the number one reason why anarchism doesn't work. Is also it's kind of like, and also is the reason why trying to outsource that problem to a state just makes it worse. And so we're gonna read a little bit tonight. Let's see. We're gonna be starting in I'm trying to pick which one should we do.
While you're doing that, so I just want to ask you a question, just to be clear, right?
Mm-hmm.
All right, I need you to remember that whenever I send you this picture.
All right, where are we sending it?
I'm texting it to you.
All right, here.
Just remember that we're friends.
Is that like a golden calf versus a golden Trump?
Yeah.
That's hilarious. Oh God, that's right. There's this one word that a prominent ANCAP philosopher named Eric July came up with, called state theist. It's kind of a conjunction of the word state and theist. And that this basically this bias is the main problem with atheism. They're not is that it's not that they're not religious, it's that their religion tends to be the state. Not always, right. But they tend to have a strong worship of the state, and they just there's that God-shaped hole in their heart, and they try to fill it with government, because man just desires to worship. Man just I'd say again,
like universities and education. Like they hold the university system as being their God.
Basically, man has a God-shaped hole in his heart, and it really only fits God, but people will try literally everything to fill it but God. And a man has this desire to worship. And anyway, he has a desire to worship something greater than himself. And as we will see in the book of Judges repeatedly, that like man will try to rule himself, and it's basically futile. That there's really no good way to for a man to rule himself, and he needs God. And okay. Oops, that's Joshua. Oopsie, I clicked the wrong link. That is Judges. Okay.
I need to have a cool flag behind me.
I know. I have that taxation is theft.
It's got a hedgehog on it?
Yep. Taxation is theft with the libertarian hedgehog. I'm not a libertarian party guy. I'm a GOP guy, but I do like the hedgehog. Don't tread on me.
It's supposed to be a porcupine, not a hedgehog, right?
Yeah, porcupine. I'm sorry. Yes, you're right. I always think they're the same. No, they're not. And I need to give myself 40 lashings later. I think I've hurt my libertarian pride for getting that wrong.
A porcupine has quills, so if you attack it, you stab. Whereas a hedgehog covers itself in its own feces. So both could be inaccurate.
That might accurately describe some libertarians. Anyway, so we're what you see in the book of Judges, we're starting here in chapter 13, and it comes with it starts off with the verse in verse 1, and the people of Israel again did what was evil in the sight of the Lord, and the Lord gave them into the hand of the Philistines for 40 years. And and what usually happens, because this happened like 15 times, where the children of Israel, they're living in anarchy, and when you have anarchy, basically you are at the mercy of everybody else's conscience. And shocker, some people have really shitty consciences and they don't do what they're supposed to do. Now, this is like where we get where we're going to talk about the first, one of the first laws of archotropism. Again, archotropism, coming from the Greek words archos and tropism, meaning to turn people towards the state, or to turn a nation, to turn a society more statist. So we're going to reading the first law of archotropism is power can neither be created nor destroyed. It may only be transferred from one wielder to another or transformed from one medium into another. The sum total of power is always conserved. Now, point 1.1. For this reason, all power is zero sum. Whatever one owns, another necessarily cannot own. Law number 2. Power seeks consolidation from lower concentration to higher concentration. Predation, in quotes, is defined as the act of consolidating power. Now, here's some more, derived. Well, if there's a kind of a general rule we can derive from this, I will start it off with for this reason. So point 2.1 is for this reason, the measure of felt strength of the incentive to wield power is relative to the total difference of power level between the predator and the prey from the predator's subjective point of view. So in other words, power moves and acts and predates based off a perceived power difference. Like a lion will go after the gazelle because the gazelle is a lot weaker, can't really fight back. And
that's terrifying, because I just realized something.
Mm-hmm.
You want to take a moment to stop on that point right there?
I think I know about the point you're going to make. Does it have to do with the left shrieking about inequality?
Yes.
Bingo. Go ahead and make the point. I'm not going to steal glory from my co-host.
If you wanted to get more power for yourself,
mm-hmm.
you would make a chant or a tagline or a idea that everyone that was part of your group was a victim, because then they would give their power to whichever figurehead was leading that organization.
That is actually one of the next rules of power, rules of archotropism. You skipped ahead a little bit. But the point I was going to make, which is very similar to this one, is that when the left is shrieking about inequality being a problem, they're actually right. That inequality is a problem because you get these big corporations who tend to like to buy out the government. It's called regulatory capture, and this is a very well known process. And the regulatory capture is expensive, and when you have enough power or wealth, you can buy it. And so yes, inequality actually is a problem because inequality is kind of the basis for all predation. And and for this next basically point 2.1, or I should say 2.2, is for this reason, weakness invites aggression. So the weaker you are, the more you're basically inviting aggression. Remember, this is what I mentioned earlier about the law of reflexivity. You fear it, therefore it comes into existence, or there's power in supplying it to you in order just to make you go away. Basically, it functions that I call it pseudo demand. In the economic sense, because you're not desiring it, but effectively you are. It's like by fearing it, it acts the way it's pseudo demand. It acts the same way as the law of demand, where if you want, the law of demand is, hey, basically, if you want something, if you demand it economically, you desire it, then there is value there. That value is created, and and there's value in someone supplying it to you at a reasonable cost, at a reasonable price. And whereas the same way with pseudo demand, it works the same way, because you fear it. There is value in someone both supplying it to you and taking it away from you. It works the same way.
Is it too soon for us to get canceled yet?
No. Oh yeah. Basically, the left fears a really hardcore right-wing populist rising to power. And by the way, that's the reason we got Donald Trump. They were like, remember in 2012, they're like, Mitt Romney is like the racist, sexist, bigoted, homophobe. He's a horrible person. And the right's like, Mitt Romney? Really? Oh, fuck you. We'll show you racist, sexist, bigot, homophobe, Donald fucking Trump.
What I was thinking about when you're talking about the people who basically your point was about the more that you fear it, the more likely it is that someone is going to come in and be that predator that takes advantage of you. Yep. And we joke around, or we hear terms like, oh, liberal snowflakes. And you hear people say, what is the left going to do next? And there is a term that I've heard, and it seems like a joke, but I've been told that it is not a joke. I've heard of transableism.
No, actually, I have heard not. I have. Oh, you identify as disabled?
Yes. You want so much to be a victim that is weaker than everyone else in your life, so that you have a reason to be not as successful, that you identify as if you were disabled, even though you're not.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, I call that mental illness.
Well, yeah, everyone, a lot of things.
Pretty much. Yeah, that's really what it is. It's like there's no like real victimhood here, but I just have a mental illness, and so that makes me disabled. And
I always wonder, like, how would you decide what your disability would be in that situation? Well, you like really legs don't work, or you're just
if you're a white woman, you consider yourself a minority. And this is one of those amazing things. I can't believe they managed to pull this off. It's like, there's a good joke by the great philosopher Louis J. Gomez. He's a comedian, and he says, God bless your hearts, white women. How did you manage to convince us all that you're a minority? And he's like, being a white woman is so hard. I experienced all this discrimination at tennis class and yoga and Whole Foods. Yep, I'm a minority, just like the black man.
No, I get like the victimhood of being in a different subsect. I mean, like literally, people are like, they will put on a cast when they wake up in the morning because they feel like,
oh my God, that's so much worse.
Work.
Oh my God, that is so much worse. It's like satire is quickly becoming reality in 2020 and 2021. It's like you never would have thought we'd see it, but like I had to stop, keep commenting on the Babylon Bee. Stop giving the left ideas.
Want a picture of like a drone that had all the, I'm not going to say which slogans, but had like all the leftists like on it, and because Biden dropped the bombs in Syria.
Yeah. Hey, can you go get your headphones and like plug them in? You cut out every now and then. Like right when you start talking, it doesn't pick you up at the first second for some reason.
I don't know that I have headphones anywhere.
Oh well.
Let me see. I'll search for them.
All right, no problem. Anyway, so let me read through some of these laws of archotropism again. Yeah, basically, we just talked about, for this reason, weakness invites aggression because of pseudo demand. And here's where it gets really interesting. For this reason, human actions of degeneracy, which signal weakness to predators, are necessarily prey behaviors. That's why people don't like things like degeneracy. They make you weak. Like take drug addiction. It's like, does it really surprise people that you're shooting heroin to your arm and you're just screwing up your brain and you're making yourself weaker? Does it really surprise you that this is a behavior that the state might like? Because now it's really these people have a demand for someone to come in and protect them. And the same thing with prostitution, because eventually let's say you're a female prostitute and you have this asset that is a young youthful beauty and appearance. And the problem with with prostitution is that eventually you're going to grow old and no one's going to love you and you're going to die alone, and that's a really shitty thing. Because basically what happens when you get old, there's nobody to take care of you, and and like you are going to have a really shitty death. So then you have this demand because for someone to come in and protect you and take care of you. In steps the state into that kind of role. That ditto a drug addict, they have the same exact demand for someone to come in and protect them and take care of them, and their family's like eventually going to cut them off. They'll try to help them initially, because there is some sympathy for drug addicts, but eventually they're like, hey, you're not changing your ways, we're cutting you off, buddy. And but then in steps the state with like the welfare system is, oh, don't worry, you're a fuck up at life, I'll take care of you, and I will force somebody else to to pay for it. Just remember to vote for me on election day. And and this is where we come back to the to to the book of Judges. See, what would happen repeatedly is, it had to happen at least 15 times in the book of Judges, was that the children of Israel, they would have this great prosperity and from living free. I mean, you don't pay taxes, there are no there are basic very, very few regulations, and you basically marry who you want, you live as you please, and you own private property. And this is like the gold standard of like libertarian anarcho-capitalism, and that the nation of Israel was. And you get enormous prosperity from it, but then people start taking it for granted, and and then they stop doing all of the responsible behaviors that that kind of made them rich in the first place. They start squandering all of their wealth through degeneracy, which is called sin. They did what was evil in the Lord's eyes, because the Lord told them, hey, don't do this, don't do this, don't do this, don't do this, but it's voluntary, you have every right to do it. So yes, that. And there was a whole bunch of things like, hey, prostitution, drug addiction, or drug use, a whole bunch of things. These were all completely legal, in the Bible. You just weren't supposed to do them voluntarily. And a lot of Christians kind of miss that, is that a lot of these like sins of consent, like gambling too, gambling isn't even considered a sin in the Bible. We do kind of consider it today, because hey, you're losing your money. Most people suck at math and they're not going to win. But but today it's like, hey, the Lord says, hey, you have every right to do these things under the law. There's not going to be a legal punishment for you if you do them, but you're not supposed to do them, because it's going to make the society weak. And what would happen is eventually you get to the point, where the children of Israel, they're too poor, they're too drug addicted, they're too disconnected from each other, there's too much mental illness, and they look like easy pickings for a neighboring state to come in and invade them. And that's what happened repeatedly, is that they would get rich, they have a great time, they would start taking it for granted and stop doing all the behaviors that were really keeping them safe, and then they get invaded and taken slaves. And then they would cry out to the Lord, say, oh, please, we're so sorry, oh, please save us. And then the Lord's like, all right, just because it's you guys. And he'd appoint a military leader called a judge to come and kind of lead them to overthrow their slavers, or the state that was keeping them enslaved. And then the cycle would kind of repeat, where they live in righteousness for a while, and they would grow strong and prosperous, and then their children would take it for granted, and and the cycle would repeat. And this is like what's called like the four turning cycle. This is why, basically why we have a war every 80 years. If you look at like 1776, they were a fourth turning generation. Every fourth turning generation is really the one that causes the war or starts it, because by then the order that has grown up over those 80 years, from like the colonists coming in all the way to the all the way to to the end, where you get the war and you get a new order that comes in, kind of wipes out the old order and installs itself. This is every four turning generation. Eventually the order doesn't work anymore. You need something new, and war is kind of a correction mechanism for that. So you see, like, from the colonists arriving to 1776 is like 80-ish years, and and so then that was like the first thing. That was basically the founding of the United States, the Declaration of Independence. You go from there to the 1850s, when you had the Civil War start, and that was about another 80 years. And that, because then the first democracy that had sprung up, or the republic, by 80 years in, the Southerners were like, fuck the Northerners, you bunch of kleptocrats. You're like passing a tariff, and we pay 85% of that tariff. It's like it's like, screw you. Oh, and not only do we pay 85% of it, but all of the like 100% of the benefits go to the North to build up your economy. It's like, I mean, this is you guys are a bunch of kleptocrats. We're leaving. And also we kind of have this problem where you guys keep like screwing with our slavery thing, and that's also a minor issue. And so we don't like that. So we're going to keep our money and our slaves and just leave. And then Lincoln's like, oh, no, you don't. I didn't give you permission to leave. And he's like, oh, let me start sending an army to start killing you guys, so you agree to stay. Anyway, but that's like that was the first four turning cycle in America. By the next four turning cycle, we get to like Woodrow Wilson, the progressive era, where Woodrow Wilson is like, America really is too free. We really need a bunch of ruling elites who will kind of determine how this country goes, and call progressives. It's like, hey, what if academia ran America? This is what you get with Woodrow Wilson. Is and he says, oh, we're going to need a few extra tools. We're going to need a Federal Reserve, a central bank, because they had gotten rid of that, and we're going to need a few more. We're going to need an income tax, because that wasn't legal back then. Back then the federal government was like 3% of the economy. Today it's like half. It's like roughly half, or like 20. No, I'm sorry, that's the total government. Today it's like 26 or 27% of the economy. Whoops. And so we went from like 3 to 28. It sucks. Anyway, and then in order to he said, oh, that, as if a central bank screwing with the money supply and an income tax, impoverishing all the people isn't enough. He said, oh, we need a World War I. And but that wasn't enough, so he got us into World War II as well. Oops. And so anyway, and then after World War II was over, then you get to kind of Bretton Woods, which is the current order, which is about to go away. And Bretton Woods is basically with the U.S. Looked at the past two world wars and said, okay, this empire thing isn't working, so here's what we're going to do about it. We see this this Red Army on the other side of Germany, and we're kind of scared shitless of it. So what we're going to do is, hey, Europe, I know you guys were just like shooting at each other, but you're all going to be on the same side now against them, because we want all of Europe in between us and the Red Army. We don't want them coming our way. And Canada, you too. And so we basically created this whole global order, based on free trade and a common currency. Because by the way, the dollar became the world currency at Bretton Woods for the first time. and all of the other European currencies were based off the dollar then. And anyway, so after that, so that current order is what's breaking down right now. And we just kind of, Donald Trump just kind of like took it to the woodshed and shot it. Because all the we have no more free trade deals with Europe. Biden's not bringing them back. We kind of fucked over China too, because we don't really want to trade with them anymore. And that's not, there will never ever be a trade deal with China. But yeah, even though it doesn't matter how much China, how much cocaine that China and hookers that China gives Hunter Biden, Joe Biden is still not going to could have given them a trade deal. And anyway, every 80-ish years you have, or every few generations, you have a new order that kind of comes in and wipes out the old order. By the way, we're due for another war. But let's keep our fingers crossed. And
like in 10 years, next year.
I know. Oh God. I'm not looking forward to this new war, whichever one it is. But we're due. Anyway, because something just spooked us with COVID. Basically every 20 years, America like kind of gets spooked by something. Like the world kind of reaches out and just rubs us in a way we really don't like, and we just freak the fuck out. And I mean, anyway, this like last time that something spooked us was 9/11. The time before that was like Japan and Europe all like screwing with their currencies, and we kind of had to retool our entire banking system to compete with them. Then in 2001 we had 9/11, and they saw, and we were like, whoa, we had no idea that could happen. How about we put our military at every trade choke point on the planet? And so now we really are a global empire, and we keep everything free, and we keep all the trade lines safe, and all the shipping routes safe with our navy, and we do that on behalf of the whole planet. By the way, free trade is not free. It costs hundreds of billions of dollars a year to make the navy that keeps it all secure. So that's a counter argument to anyone who says free trade is free. It's not. You have to keep all that shit, all that trade secure somehow, and the American Navy is the one that does that for the whole planet. And by the way, we're not interested in trading with you anymore unless we have a trade deal with you. So that's like Japan, North Korea, China, or not China, Canada, and Mexico. I'm forgetting one. Yeah, okay, I forget. Oh yeah, Great Britain. That one's coming, but it's not here yet. But those, like, if you're not one of those six, screw you. You can defend your own trade. Good luck. Oh, by the way, next time you sit next, and if let's say you're Europe and you get a lot of your oil from the Middle East, and right now you have America pulling back. Remember, part of America is we put a gun to everybody's head and said, hey, you're all on the same side now, with our side against the Soviets. And part of that was we talked to like Iran first, and then Saudi Arabia after Iran didn't work out. And we said, hey, you're all on the same side now, us. And we're not interested in the Middle East anymore. So next time shit hits the fan in the Middle East, we're just going to sit back and crack open some popcorn and see Middle East politics unfold. And the rest of the world can crumble, and we don't care. And because we don't get our oil from the Middle East anymore, guess what? We're oil independent. Wonderful. If now that you have two countries who are really trying to decide who's in charge in the Middle East, that's like Iran and Saudi Arabia. They both have really strong opinions about who that should be. And it's like a 5,000-year-old blood feud that has kind of degenerated into a knife fight. And and whenever they decide they want to shoot at each other again, that's the world's problem, not America's. Oh well.
Not dependent upon Middle East oil, because we just shut down the Keystone XL pipeline, and now we're bombs in Syria. So
but with the what will happen eventually is that when the Middle East decides they want to do politics again, and they want to start, and by politics I mean shoot at each other, then because that's how Middle East politics is done. It's not done through diplomacy ever. And what America will do is, the American president within 10 minutes is going to be like, all right, no more oil exports to the rest of the world. That will put us at a price per barrel of oil of around $75 a barrel, which is more than profitable for all the fracking. And all the fracking companies that we do, they're profitable by like 40 to 50. So 75 is wonderful for them. And but with like an old traditional oil drilling operation. It would take like years to get into it would take like years in order to get that thing up and running. With fracking, it takes like 6 months. So literally within 6 months, like our oil problems are gone, and we're at $75 a barrel, which is fine, and the rest of the world is like in the 120s to 130s. Fuck them. So anyway, but that's, by the way, that's what's coming. To the audience, that's what's coming for the rest of the world. And and the rest of the world's gonna have to figure out how they how they get oil, and we're not going to have to. We're just going to be chugging along just fine. And but that's because this four-turning cycle is now breaking down. But let's get back to the book of Judges. So the book of so again, what this cycle kept repeating, and you had in the with these Israelites, this is a problem that happened over and over and over again, where they lived prosperous and free, and then they took all that for granted and squandered it and became poor and weak, and their weakness invited aggression from neighboring states. By the way, God, good job, good job I would never pick God to be my real estate agent. He managed to put Israel in the in the one place where they were surrounded by neighbors that wanted them dead. It's like, it's like the worst possible neighborhood to put them in. But hey, he still managed to pull off an anarchy in a extremely dangerous neighborhood, and nobody's pulled it off since. It's the only ANCAPISTAN to ever exist, and the Lord God is the one who pulled it off. So choke on that one, Milton Friedman. And I say Milton Friedman, even though he was a monarchist. I could have said Rothbard or Mises, but I'm just going to piss off the ANCAPs. Just that little dig. So anyway, so what eventually happened was, after they got invaded and captured, and they went through this cycle 15 times, they finally said, oh God, we suck at this anarchy thing. And they came to the prophet Samuel, and they said, Samuel, please, please appoint a king for us. We're really tired of this anarchy thing. We need their actual words were, give unto us a king who will fight our battles for us and be our judge. And because they were also having kind of a minor problem with got cut with judges being corrupt and taking bribes, and that but the king they would get never had a monopoly on the courts, so that didn't really help them. But the only thing their eventual king would do initially was guard them from battle. So it was guard them from foreign invaders. He would be the commander of the standing army, basically. And they would get, and of course the prophet Samuel, he went and communed with God, and God came back and immediately said, give them this warning: your king is going to be the horrible tyrant. He'll put a 10% income tax on you. He'll take a tenth of your sons, a tenth of your land, a tenth of your grain, a tenth of all your servants, so like a tenth of everything. And and the Israelites said, I understand where the Israelites were coming from. Like, only a tenth? That's your definition of a tyrant? I'll sign me up right now. If you met the Democrats, they're pushing 70. It's like, only 10? Really? This is your definition of a tyrant? I'll sign me up. I want that king too. But unfortunately, that is the Israelites said a 10th deal. For 10, that sounds like a deal. We're really tired of getting invaded. And so, they get King Saul. And this is basically the division of the Old Testament. Is they had perfect freedom, and then they got themselves a king that would only do military stuff. And they didn't. He didn't only do military stuff. Shocker. The government decided that it needed more responsibilities and just gave it to themselves. And eventually, the rest of the Old Testament is basically Israel, kind of having to come to terms with the mistake they made in getting a monarch. Because they thought that having a monarch, having a king, would solve their problem of invasion, and unfortunately, it didn't. Because you get King Saul, who was a mighty warrior, and he lost his battle. He lost the battle to the Philistines, and they chopped his head off. Oops. And that was, after he, he basically turned to, he saw the Philistine army. He's like, we're not going to win. And he has his servant, like kill him. And, or maybe I got that part of the storyline. Maybe he killed himself because the servant refused to do it. I forget. Anyway, but
After
yeah.
A psychic.
Yeah, basically, he went to a psychic too, which, by the way, he had outlawed. He had outlawed divination, which actually was a death penalty crime, or witchcraft. By the way, the only drug use was completely legal in the Bible, and except for one, they had one exception to that, which was a capital crime, which was witchcraft. And because a lot of these hallucinogenic drugs, this is how you perform magic. There's a critical element in the magic process, and I'm saying magic in quotes because we don't really believe in that stuff anymore. But this is how, if you wanted to be a magician, this is how you do it. You need these drugs, and this is why that was why they outlawed that. And so King Saul had outlawed that, but he wanted to figure out what was going to happen to him the next day. But the prophet Samuel had died. Normally he would go ask the prophet Samuel. Prophet Samuel had died though, so he went to this witch or his necromancer in order to summon the soul of Samuel. And Samuel told him, like, you really weren't supposed to do this, and because of it, you're gonna die tomorrow. Oops. And then he died. He got killed by the Philistines, and Israel got invaded and taken captive. Their capital city of Jerusalem was taken over by the Philistines, and the Ark of the Covenant was captured. And so that all sucked. And so then they got the next the next king had already been anointed, which was David. And so David kind of comes over and beats the Philistines anyway, David he beats the Philistines and then rules for a few decades before he dies, and his son Solomon takes over. And Solomon's where the first expansion of government comes in. And so Solomon, he's a very wise man, but he's a big tax and spend liberal. He's like, really, it really is unfortunate that I'm living in a palace and the Lord God is living in a tent. He's not really living in a tent, but he meant the Ark of the Covenant was in a tabernacle, which was basically a really big tent. And so Solomon decided to tax all the people to have a big spending project to build the temple. It was a really beautiful temple, and and so you had this really gigantic expansion of government under Solomon, and which was a lot more than the Israelites initially bargained for, because they thought they were only getting like a military ruler. And
hilarious enough, King Solomon was actually one of the first proponents of identity intersectionality. I mean, if you look at all of his wives, there's a group of women there from all different religions and races and backgrounds.
Oh yeah, man, he was a real ladies' man. And by the way, he wrote this excellent book called Song of Solomon. If you want to get some good marriage advice, and it's coming from a guy who really would know. He had what 600 wives or something like that. The guys, you got to know women in order to make that work. Anyway, so the story continues that after Solomon dies, his son Rehoboam is the king of Israel, and this is where the problem of a state gets much worse. And because he had, his older advisors were like, hey, your father taxed the people of the northern tribes way too harshly. And, you really should cut taxes. And Rehoboam, unfortunately, listened to his younger advisors who were like, no, you need to show strength and, keep the tax nice and high. And the northern tribes were like, screw you. So basically, Rehoboam kept the taxes high, and the northern tribes seceded. They're like, okay, we're not a nation with you anymore. So not only did that when the Israelites went from anarchy into monarchy, not only did it not solve their invasion problem, because they kept getting invaded by the Babylonians, the Greeks, and Romans, later, just their problems with other governments invading just got bigger and bigger and bigger. But their problem of, hey, how do we stay a united nation? That got worse. Like they weren't even, by the 3 generations into the monarchies, like, they weren't even a monarchy anymore. I mean, that they weren't even a united nation anymore. They had 2 different nations, and of course I believe it was the northern kings were, like hideously corrupt. I forget which one. It's either the north or the south. I forget which one, but some of the kings were better than others, and the other side just had just terrible kings. And not that any king is good, but that some are definitely worse than others. And so they had this 4 turning cycle that was present both when they were in anarchy and later when they were a monarchy. And what the moral of the story for this is that man's attempts to rule himself are basically futile. Nothing we do really works because of this 4 turning cycle. People they don't they take for granted what they were given. And that basically like in our day, the baby boomers were the generation that just inherited everything. Life was so much simpler for them, but they managed to leave to their children a debt-ridden nation that is intensely divided. We're like like their children, the millennials, will certainly grow up poorer than they did. And it's all because the baby boomers everything was so easy for them because their parents were like, we will make sure our children have a nice life because all the crap that we went through. And unfortunately, it looks like the millennials are about to do that with their children, because we had the same experience of, we had such a crap life. We will make sure that we hand our children a much better society than we were handed. And unfortunately, that ends up being the thing that causes, remember the law of reflexivity. We're going to tie that right back in. And again, the thing you fear will come into existence. You fear your children having a hard life, and therefore they're going to have a hard life because you made it way too easy for them. And same thing with same thing with the children of Israel. They feared slavery, and so and they feared all the hard times, so they gave their children much better lives than they had, and they lived much better lives. But they didn't really pass it on to their children. Their children would never, they never kept their parents' values, and thus you get the cycle repeats. It's like the 4 turning cycle really is neatly summed up in like this one meme you've probably seen, is that bad times create strong men create good times create weak men, and weak men create bad times. The 4 turning cycle. This is something that every nation has to deal with. And if you're going to be if you are anarcho-capitalist, you're going to have to deal with the 4 turning cycle. There's no way around it. And you can still argue that, hey, having a state doesn't necessarily make the 4 turning cycle better. In fact, it may even make it worse. But you, the ANCAP, are still going to have to deal with this. And there doesn't seem to be a good solution to it, because we've sure been trying for at least 30, at least the last 3,500 years. We've been trying to figure out how to rule ourselves, and we can't really figure that out. And there's probably a reason for that. This very reason probably is, we have a God-shaped hole in our heart, and we have, and part of that, understanding that God-shaped hole is kind of what you said originally, Harry, is that, we kind of, we have a hole in our heart where God is supposed to be, and we're supposed to be ruled by God, and, the problem is that the Lord is like, as we said in the beginning, he's kind of a free will extremist. The only real libertarian is God. Because he is the ultimate free will extremist, and he's not here to force you to do his bidding. He wants you to love him, and in order for you to really love him at your fullest, you have to be completely and totally free, because love is always freely given. If it's coerced, it's not love. And that was something Satan never understood. True love is always given freely.
Do you know what the God is to libertarians?
What?
So if you really talk with someone and you talk about like what the idea and the core tenets of libertarianism is, and bring up these natural fears, like, well, what keeps people from doing this? What happens here? Or how do you prevent this from happening? In religion, people always interpret the will of God, or they interpret things to suit their needs and suit their personal understanding, and they twist it.
Really? Yeah, I've seen this.
It's the nap.
Yeah, he's basically the non-aggression principle, or at least he's a far more extreme version of it. He's like, I'm not forcing you to do anything. It's like, I want you to love me, therefore I'm going to let you be completely free. I have all of this power. He's like the ultimate king. You know, he's the only good king, really. He has all. He's omnipowerful, all powerful, but he doesn't use his power. Is like the perfect kind of king. It's like the king that lets you be completely free. He has all the power in the world, but he just doesn't use it. And like, show me one human king that would do the same thing. They don't exist, because like, hey, man cannot rule himself. We are meant to be ruled by God. And and every time man tries to find a way to rule himself, whether in anarchy or with the state, it doesn't work, because man fundamentally cannot rule himself. And as if you want to outsource that problem to a state, which is basically just other men who also can't rule themselves, you're just compounding the problem, because not only can these rulers not rule themselves, now you want them to rule other people. Like, that doesn't work. It's like, so man can't rule himself. He can't rule other men. What are you going to do? You need to, we have to be ruled by God. And that's where we're going to leave it tonight. There are more laws of archotropism for us to talk about, but we're going to get to those in future episodes. So thank you very much. Harry, any final words?
No, I mean, just, if you ever find yourself wondering what the most important thing or the best way to interact in life is, or you feel yourself being violent, just, get down on your knees and pray to the nap.
I'll make a libertarian out of you yet. Thanks, Harry. Have a nice night.
Bye.